Hello and welcome. This is Bhavna Shrivastava, The Golden Light, and we are listening to God, Goodness, Love, and Light. So, welcome back, everybody. As we continue doing, wonderful things and we talk about different things um, with God, goodness, and how amazing people, good people in this world are doing God's work and bringing in their love to what they do and spreading their light with that, right? So, in this, I have a guest today, and her name is Amy Todisco, and she is the owner of Green Living. And we will interview her and see how her love for what she does has shifted her to do this work. She is in alignment with what we are doing, trying to bring people to you to understand why, what you love is important to do, and that should be your purpose. And focus on that because when you do what you love, you know, you create ripples of that, right? I'm all about that. So, welcome, Amy.
Thank you so
And
much.
I am so happy to have you here on our podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, so let's start with how did you get into it and what are
Yes.
you doing and why are you doing what you're doing?
Yeah, perfect. So, what I do is I teach people how to eliminate toxins from their food, their household products, even how they build their homes if they're building it themselves, and embrace holistic health strategies, ultimately, so that they can thrive and stay away from pharmaceuticals and doctors. And that's something that I've been doing my whole life. And it's taken a variety of forms. Currently, I live, actually, for the last 15 years, I've been living on an organic farm in Vermont with my husband, Dave. But I grew up in New York City, and that was really the antithesis of the kind of life that I live today because I am not somebody that does well in a city kind of environment. Um,
So I love that. So from the city girl going and having a farm of your own.
yes, it was a
How
dream,
was that
actually.
transition? How was that transition?
It was easy. In fact, I had my interim years in Massachusetts, so that was a suburb and kind of gave me a little bit of an experience of living away from a city. And then I've actually lived in Vermont 24 years, longer than anywhere else. And I remember remarking that it felt like I was on vacation for the first few years because I used to come here on vacation, right? I used to come to ski. I really didn't get a chance to see Vermont in the summer until I was an adult. And my goodness, what an amazing place.
That is nice. So
Yeah.
tell me, how did you get into doing green living? Like you talked about,
Yep.
all the different things. So
Right.
tell me, how did that
Right.
start?
So I had an early start as far as good food. My stepfather was a chef and he made all these beautiful meals from scratch every day, which I've done my entire life. And my mom was really into a nutritionist by the name of Adele Davis. And so we didn't have junk food in our home, except for Halloween candy. Halloween candy. And I was not, I didn't have a totally pure palate though, because my dad and his wife were very kind of, typical American diet. And I had my first summer job at 16 at a health food store. And that was sort of my first awakening. I learned about organic food. I learned about vitamins and supplements, a little bit about household products. Mostly I remember switching my shampoo at that time. But then when I was pregnant with my daughter, many years later, I came upon this little paperback book called The Non-Toxic Baby, and I was shocked. There were all these toxic synthetic chemicals in everyday products like shampoo, including baby shampoo and um, cleaning products and carpets and paints. Pretty much everything that we buy and bring into our home may contain toxic chemicals, and all of these chemicals outgas so that they fill our indoor air environment, right? And our indoor air actually is more polluted typically than even some of the most polluted outdoor cities. And so
Oh, that's
I started
interesting.
to learn all this, and I was so puzzled that nobody was talking about it. Nobody was really protecting us because all of these things were legally allowed, although in other countries they're banned.
So can you tell us a little bit about the indoor air? What do you
Sure.
mean? How's it? polluted. Like even if people are keeping their house clean, you
Right.
know.
So sometimes the whole keeping it clean thing actually creates more problems. So if people are using things like bleach or just sort of typical multi what's the word? Multi-use type sprays. And I can give you the perfect example of when you walk down the aisle in the supermarket where all of the cleaning products are. For
Mhm.
me anyway, I smell such a strong scent, and these are all bottles that are tightly sealed. So imagine you're using all of this stuff in your home, you're spraying the counters, you think you need to disinfect from the germs, and then, that is actually stuff that you're breathing and it's getting into the indoor air. But then you add to that all the other things. So our furniture can have things like formaldehyde, which is basically embalming fluid. Carpets, especially new ones, will have all sorts of chemicals that you can pretty much smell. Most people, when you walk into a home that has a new carpet, you can generally smell that smell. Or air fresheners or plug-ins. There's just a myriad of things that all send these little
Even
chemicals
even
into the air.
plugins, because we feel plugins and air fresheners are actually something which cleans the air and makes you feel better.
No, not if they're the typical kind. So the kind that do make you feel better are if it's a pure essential oil, they have diffusers now that are pure essential oils. Those are wonderful. Or yeah, that's pretty much the only kind. The regular air, the stuff that people see on TV to spray your couch so it doesn't smell like your dog. Not good. Um, And when you think about whatever you're washing your clothes in is the same thing that's on your bedding, right? So you're wearing that 24/7, and a lot of them have very strong smells, and many of the chemicals hide in the scent. So anything that has a fragrance, it's usually, called a perfume, parfum on the label, or just regular scented everyday products have a ton of chemicals, and we don't even know what those are because those are the ones that are sort of hidden in the proprietary formulas. Um,
Mm.
but if it's not a pure essential oil, it is most likely something that you probably don't want to be sniffing.
Right, right. Yes, I try to do the air purifiers and add the different oils to
Oh,
it.
the diffusers?
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
So that smells so good.
Right. So you can have pure lavender or lemon oil
Orange.
or whatever you like.
Yes.
Yes, those are good.
Okay. Good, good. And tell me about the farm. So how
Right.
did you get into from cleaning that and actually having your farm, and what do you do there?
Right. So I had a few steps before I got to the farm. When I started my Green Living Now business 20 years ago, I was doing newsletters and consultations, going into people's homes and talking to them about what might be under the sink. And I then got this awesome opportunity to be the technical editor of the Green Living for Dummies book, the 2008 version. And then I was hired by Seventh Generation to lead a new nonprofit that they had started many years ago called the Household Toxins Institute. And so I had a whole bunch of experiences before that, but how I got to the farm is actually because I met my husband Dave on Match.com, and he's an organic farmer. And I was living about a half an hour away. And so it was kind of a neat little green living expert meets organic farmer connection. And we both have a passion for the land, for plants, for animals, for educating, for inspiring. So 15 years ago when I got here, he was busily growing vegetables and just doing an amazing job. And I brought in this whole aspect of sharing that information with other people. So we've had, food festivals, we've had farm to table dinners, farm camps for kids. I do these unique food and farm tours every year for the past 5 or 6 years now, where I take people through the farm. We talk about, a little bit about the history of the farm because it was a dairy farm before Dave turned it into an organic vegetable farm. And then they taste their way through. So we talk about what is organic and how do you do organic growing? What is sustainability, and what's wrong with the conventional system? And so they get to taste their way through, pick a green bean off the plant or a cherry tomato, and then we will learn a bit about medicinal herbs. I actually have them look where they're standing, and typically they'll see something called plantain, and that can be used if you chew it and mix your spit with it, you can put it on an insect bite and relieve the sting and the itch. So all those kinds of neat little things. And then we have a maple sugar house because Dave also makes maple syrup. And so we do that whole conversation about, well, how do you get sap out of a tree and turn it into syrup? And then we actually come up to the house and see some more medicinal herbs and vegetables, small scale. And then we end at this big hydroponic greenhouse that Dave was one of the three partners that started it and ran it for 10 years. And that's a half an acre indoor greenhouse that functions year round that grows lettuce and basil and watercress.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
It is pretty wild when you walk into that space and you just see this incredible sea of green and it's warm and it's just such a lovely experience, especially in the wintertime.
Yes, I can believe so. So tell me more about, how you got into the greenhouse. That's what I was coming to, like, because I know you are up in the Vermont where it's cold most of the
Yes.
time.
Right.
So how do you, did you start with the greenhouse? Like, was it like now we can't do anything in the winter time, or what do we do?
Yeah, so Dave and these two brothers, John and Ted, had been talking for a while about, innovative ideas to do with farming. And Dave particularly did research around hydroponic, which is growing in water. And we found that that's actually being used in places around the world, even in places that you couldn't grow outdoors because the land is not suitable for whatever reason. Maybe it's a desert or it's just not good soil. And worldwide, we've lost a ton of topsoil. So they were looking at part of it was how to grow something year round in Vermont. And Vermont has this sort of reputation for being this clean, healthy place, which is very focused on food and farms, which is true. We still have our challenges, conventional dairy farms using glyphosate and things that are very toxic. But for the most part, Vermont is a pretty conscious state when it comes to health and well-being. And so they looked at what it would take and they got a bunch of loans to create the infrastructure because it was a pretty high upfront cost. And they started with a quarter of an acre. And we did a bunch of research and one of the partners really wanted to do lettuce, which is what everybody else was doing, and we were pushing for no, let's do things that are different. We want to, have something unique. And so we settled upon the lettuce, the basil, and the watercress. And within the first year, Dave and I went down to Boston and there was this food show and we met some folks from Whole Foods and they were really intrigued by what we were talking about. And so I created this little video of what it looked like in the greenhouse and sort of did the story of the three partners. And, the brothers actually had a bit of a farm background as well. And then we brought samples down to let them try them.
Mhm.
And it is, it's so different. The food that is grown in a hydroponic greenhouse has everything that it needs. And so what that means is that the plants end up being very tender, oftentimes sweeter. They're it's a different kind of energy because the ones that are grown outdoors are struggling so much more, right? They're dealing with maybe a heavy downpour of rain or a lot of wind or too much sun or too much heat or not enough. All these different variables make the plant have to struggle harder to survive. And so in the case with basil, for example, we actually stopped growing basil outdoors and do it all under a cold frame greenhouse, which, just has the plastic hoop over it or the plastic, with the hoop, just to protect it from the elements. And it delivered a much nicer, basil that wasn't quite as bitter. Um, yeah, so it was really a lot of trial and error. So we ended up getting this big Whole Foods account, which was sort of what launched the business, and it is their biggest client, still to this day. Now I think it's been 11 years.
So
And
tell me one more thing, which
sure.
I'm sure a lot of people have a curiosity on,
Yes.
is when you do hydroponics, right?
Yep.
Now, when we know the regular that plants should be grown in the soil to get all the minerals and vitamins, whatever we ingest,
Right.
so we can have all of that. When
Yes.
you do hydroponics, the plant is not having the dirt. So does it still have all those things or no?
Yes. So the soil in organic is really, the living soil is what you're creating to create these really healthy plants. In the hydroponic, you're getting the same types of minerals that are liquid that are put into the water. So really the soil is serving as a buffer when the plants are in the ground. Um, the nutrients are the same. The nutrient profile, you're just putting them in a different form. Where on an organic farm with soil, you would be using things like, composted manure or compost, or any number of different types of seaweed and fish emulsion and that sort of thing. You have to use slightly different ones in the hydroponic because you're mixing it with water and the plants are being held in place by some sort of substance. We started using something called rock wool, which was a natural spun volcanic mineral, I believe. And now they've gone to a much cheaper horticulture foam. Um, but it's a very similar growing system in the sense that the difference being the soil versus the water, but the nutrients are the same. And you can grow hydroponic using conventional methods, so that would be using all kinds of, toxic sprays. Whereas, this was done the same type of, way that we do the organic farm. So we wouldn't use any kind of, toxic herbicides. There really aren't as many pests in an indoor system like that either. I think there were like two main things that they were dealing with. But it's way different than what you're experiencing outdoors.
That's nice. So tell me a little bit more about you.
Okay.
And you do you have kids and are they into it or do they eat healthy just like
Yeah,
you?
so this is a great question. So I do have a daughter. She's 31, and I raised her all on organic food, non-toxic home, the whole thing, all holistic health tools. And she was incredibly healthy and really was never getting sick compared to, all the other kids that she went to school with. However, she always, I think, particularly when she was a teenager, it was hard for her to have such a healthy mom because even though she went to a Waldorf school for a little while, not a lot of those parents were doing the same thing that I was doing. And so it made her feel separate and different. So we had a little bit of a challenge there, but she continued to do all the things that we were doing at home. Once she went to college, though, then she got to
Yeah.
make the choices for herself. And of course, the food was very different at school than it was at home. So but as an adult living on her own, and she lives nearby, she, for the most part, does follow the same type of food choices. So she'll mostly buy organic. She'll mostly buy, the grass-fed, grass-finished beef at the store near her, or organic chicken or wild-caught fish. She's not as committed to the personal care products and the household products as I am, but she will make sure she doesn't use deodorant that has aluminum. And we talk back and forth a little bit about, okay, maybe you could switch your shampoo and get, something that doesn't have such a strong smell. And, so I think it's really a part of her foundation, and she's, trying to find her own way.
Yeah. So how easy or hard was it for you to get to this kind of a life?
For me, it was not really hard because I had that early background with my mom that was unique.
Hmm.
We used to take something she called Pep Up that was absolutely disgusting. I remember it had brewer's yeast in it, but we didn't get sick hardly ever as well. And so I think my daughter has learned, well, so here's a perfect example. When I met my husband, Dave, he wasn't even eating the organic food that he was growing. And he was not aware about all the household products piece of it. And so I think for the first 2 years that I was with him, he would get sick at the end of the farm season with bronchitis or something. And that had been something that had happened to him every year for years. And then all of a sudden I noticed that stopped happening because he'd adopted the way that I was living, which for me felt very easy and comfortable. I mean, the biggest struggle was the cost of it. I didn't have as much money at different times that, made my choices have to be like, okay, I'm going to invest more in food and maybe less in something else because I know how important it is to eat really well or to buy a vitamin supplement that I thought was going to be, helpful. Um, but so what I noticed was Dave stopped getting sick. And now, we're 15 years, we don't get sick, knock on wood. I mean, we once in a while we might start to get, a sore throat, but then after a couple of days of, maybe I take extra medicinal mushrooms or, a homeopathic remedy or whatever it is,
Right.
and it goes away.
Yes, I actually noticed that, in the long term, when people
Yes.
talk about, living organic way of life is
Yes.
very expensive. And I say,
Yes.
actually,
Yes.
if you look at it long term wise, this is much more cheaper and healthier.
Thank you.
You
Yes.
know?
And so this is a point that I try to make. So I have created some online courses that I've distilled all of this information that I've learned all these 30 plus years. And one of the points that I make to people when I talk about this is that it may seem like upfront you're paying more, but if you think about what you're saving as far as, I mean, I don't go to the doctor unless I have some sort of,
You're
unusual thing
becoming more
happening.
healthier. Yes.
Exactly. And so for me, it's an investment in good health. So I'm avoiding paying for other stuff down the line. And I think that that is a shift in the way that we're thinking. And I was even talking about the fact that conventional food looks like it's cheaper at the store, but when you really understand what's going on behind it and how much in the US, for example, there's so many government subsidies that make that food appear cheaper and the cost of organic looks higher, but it's because it doesn't get the subsidies. And growing on an organic farm, you are having to pay people so much more for labor because instead of spraying that herbicide along, your cornfield to get rid of the weeds, and that happens instantly. We're weeding by hand multiple times and then, with a hoe and so it takes a lot more work to raise the vegetables without chemicals. And even the fertilizers, like conventional fertilizers such as Miracle Grow or the things that are, basically petroleum based are very fast acting. And that was why they were so exciting to the farmers when they first, shared them when the whole revolution that brought us all these synthetic products, they were so shocked to see how quickly the field turned green. And with organic, you're thinking more of a long range. You don't want that fast acting. You want more of a sustained release so that you're getting, nutrients over time. And so I guess it's a similar philosophy for me when I think about, eating really good quality whole foods that are organic and using products that, maybe are slightly more expensive to buy, but when you think about it, you're not even using as many things as you thought you needed. So, I can clean the house with like two or three things and I don't need all of those
You know,
expensive
yeah.
products with chemicals, right? So it's a long-term philosophy of investing in the good food and the non-toxic products and the holistic choices instead of running to a doctor and saying, "Hey, I've got these symptoms. What have you got?" And then they bring, they give you a pill or maybe they, if it's something really serious, they recommend surgery or what have you. And I have no interest in that if I can, avoid it.
That's true. I mean, I have shifted to cleaning my countertops and my cooking range with,
Yes.
baking soda.
Yeah,
And that's it. And so
right.
there's no fumes which you're inhaling.
Exactly.
And, I remember I got all these allergic reaction to like I'll be coughing or my kids getting sick. And now
Yes.
that I just clean it, it just feels clean and there's none of those fumes going on in my
Exactly,
house.
because
So
I don't think people necessarily make the connection between, their allergies or their skin rashes or their lung problems or,
with
asthma,
their
etc.
breathing. It's like how every day you live affects
Yes,
your life, and
absolutely.
also affects your thoughts. So
Yes,
all those are going into your body. People don't realize it. Like you will think accordingly
exactly.
because that chemical is going interfering with the chemistry in your
Right.
body and
Right.
creating a different chemistry. It is affecting your actual DNA without you realizing. It's like a silent DNA shifter.
Right, because a lot of those actually penetrate the brain, the blood-brain barrier.
Everything goes into the brain.
Yeah.
We are like sponges, I feel.
Yes.
So when
Yes.
we are like sponges, we just take everything which is in the air without even realizing it, because
Exactly.
you know
Yeah, so I think it's a lot more work when people are thinking about going from, a mainstream sort of way of living to this way. But I recommend that people just take a step-by-step approach. You don't have to do everything overnight like I did.
yes.
Once
And
I found
I
out everything, I was like, okay, clear out all this junk. I'm getting all the better stuff. And then trying to figure out what was better because, 30 years ago, we didn't know as much as we do today. There was still greenwashing, which is, when the manufacturer says all these wonderful things on the label about the product, and maybe it looks like it's in this really lovely earthy packaging and it says non-toxic, but you turn it around and you read the ingredients and you're thinking, well, I can't even pronounce some of this stuff. So trying to figure out what is actually good to use has been an ongoing process. I mean, things that I used to use, then those brands get purchased by corporate entities, and sometimes the formulations change and sometimes they don't, but it's hard to know. So, yeah,
I
an
think it's
ongoing process.
yes, I think it's all like we are all going back to the old way of living, actual the original way of living,
Yes. And
being natural
that's an
and
interesting
accepting.
point because
Yeah.
organic growing is actually the way we used to do it before all the chemicals came in. So it's kind of funny that we have to
Exactly.
call
Before
it.
they all came into, okay, this will stay longer if we add this in. You know?
Yes.
And it's the same thing with the food. Oh, this will stay longer in the fridge or in the shelves, and then we can make more money.
Yes, and that's a really frustrating aspect that I don't know that people realize when you go to a supermarket, for example, and you buy even the organic produce that's fresh, oftentimes that's about a week old from the point of when it was picked to the getting to the store. And so then they're not allowed to use any sprays on the organic stuff, but there is one thing that got passed. It's I think it's A peel on conventional and Ed peel or organa peel. I have been looking on labels to see if I can find it, but it's some kind of a waxy coating, and the whole purpose of it is to make it look like the vegetable is fresher. So we know that that's not doing us any favors, right? Because the longer something is sitting on the shelf, it's losing nutrients left and
There's
right.
no, I call it like the longer it is lifeless, you know?
Totally,
There's
totally.
there's
I
no
mean, it's
life.
it's
You're
even
supposed to eat
questionable when it
healthy life,
arrives.
alive food, because
Yes,
we are alive. Our body is
correct.
alive. And so
Right.
we
And
should be eating something, the food, which is like the vegetables we put in, so that our cells feel better.
totally. And so when people come for a farm tour and they taste the food right off the plant, they are just kind of amazed at the difference.
Yeah,
Somebody
it's
would say,
more
"Oh, well, I don't really
cleaner.
like kale." And I'd say, "Oh, okay, great. Here, you want to try a little taste of this and see what you think?" And they're just, "Wow, that is really different than I expected."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know I had when we grew our own, in Massachusetts when we were there, and we
Oh,
had
yes.
one time we had this big, and this thick, and all natural, all organic cucumber.
Oh my goodness. Or I thought you were going to tell me zucchini because sometimes when we don't see
Yeah,
those, they can get
cucumber,
really big.
this big, and it
Wow.
was the one I put in for pickle, so which is supposed to
Oh
be the
my
small.
goodness.
And it was like a pickle, but it grew like this big
Giant.
because everything was organic in our yard.
Yes. Yes.
I would just put the eggshells or scraps of vegetable,
Yep. Yep.
whatever, and I would just throw it in there, and so nothing else. And it started to grow, and it was like this big, and it was the biggest we ever had. And it was like,
That's
wow,
amazing.
look at this. It was, and look at the color. It's like, you
Yeah. And
don't
it
see,
tasted good too.
and it tasted so good.
Yeah.
When you're growing your own food, when you eat that, oh my God, that's the
Yeah,
best.
even though I have all this amazing food down and I keep looking over to because the farm is over here to my right. Um, so I have this amazing food that I have access to every day, and I still like to grow my own. So I have gardens up here by the house just because I love that experience of taking a tiny seed and putting it into the soil, that I've been nurturing. and making that soil as healthy as possible. Because one thing that's different about organic soil versus conventional is that when I say a living soil, what that means is that there are all these little microorganisms that you can't see with your eyes that are breaking down the organic matter. So organic matter is anything, like roots and leaves that have decayed and, even old vegetables and fruits that have decayed and gone back into the soil. So those microorganisms are actually breaking that stuff down to feed whatever it is that you're putting in. And a soil, or so that's soil versus dirt. So right on a conventional farm, it's really more of this dirt holding the plant in place so that it can then be doused with all these synthetic fertilizers and herbicides to get rid of the weeds. And it's just a whole different kind of process and focus. And so when we're working with, we're working with the weather, and I even work with the nature spirits. We've had some, challenging weather now that climate change seems to be really kicking in, and I have these
Tell me more
conversations with
about that.
nature spirits to help us protect things from, surprising frosts, or, even when we have too many wild animals that are trying to access all of the vegetables. Like, for corn season, Dave has to put netting, like bird netting, over the corn, but then he's actually got to put an electric fence wire around so that the bears don't get in. So there's a lot of different, challenges when you're farming organically.
That's true. I remember when we would grow our own vegetables, like this is at a small scale, not like a big
Yes.
scale, but I would grow our own on one side and then I would go and put on the other side. And I would tell all the bunnies and all the
Yes.
animals, deers, and everyone, this is for you. Don't
And did
come
they stay on their side?
they stayed, they finished the whole thing, like to
Uh-huh.
the roots. All I grew strawberries, potatoes, and everything, and they
Yes.
ate it all the way to the roots. And I was like,
Wow.
we're not supposed to eat the whole all the
Yes,
roots.
I had a similar experience because my garden, I never had a fence around it until a few years ago. I had woodchucks that were just ravenous. They were eating, the kale plant before it even got big, and chipmunks were stealing strawberries.
Chipmunks,
So
they
I
they love they love
yeah, so I
they
put
love
a
eating all my green beans.
oh yes, mine too. The entire plant's gone.
Yes, the
I
green
had
beans
like
and
12
the
of them. They were
eggplants. They just
yeah.
loved it. And I was like,
Yeah, so
you can
so
eat
what
the
I
leaves, leave the eggplant.
right, I had a couple of times where this happened where so I put a fence around it, and then I would put some vegetables over to the side, and I telepathically would say to them, "Okay, this is yours. You need to leave my stuff alone." And that worked for the most part. I did that another place where there was no fence. There was a woodchuck living underneath the farm stand at this place that we were gardening, and he kept eating, he or she kept eating everything. And so I said, "Listen, I'll trade. I'll bring you snacks. I'll put them in your hole. Just please don't eat, all the stuff that we're growing." And that actually worked remarkably well. So
I think when you talk to them, you become part of the nature and they start to
yeah, and
understand
have
that
respect
over
because I
time.
know they're hungry, and so I
Yes.
want to give them something, but I just don't want them stealing everything.
I know. All right. So this was wonderful knowing things. And before we go, can you tell a little bit about people and any tips, what they can start to do and how can they start the little shifts and what should
Yes.
they start with first thing?
Yep.
You know, because it's
So,
always the what do I do first? How do I do?
yes. So I always start with food because to me, food is medicine, and we are what we eat, two cliches. And so what I typically will recommend people do is if they're, especially if they've never bought organic before, there is something called the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15 list. And that is on the Environmental Working Group's website. So that's ewg.org. I have this information in my course as well, but
And
um,
I'll put that down so people can look at that as
perfect.
well.
Yeah, because there's a free preview of a bunch of lessons of the course too, just so people can see what it's all about. So
Definitely.
the Dirty Dozen, they do this new list every year, but typically strawberries are always at the top. Strawberries, spinach, apples, those are the ones that you want to make sure you prioritize buying organic. But then the clean 15 are things like avocado and onions that are not sprayed very heavily so that you can kind of, save a little money by buying those. And, there's all kinds of money saving tips that I've discovered as far as how to save and buy organic. So one big thing is to buy things when they're on sale. And especially if they're bulk, like coffee, I can save like $3 a pound sometimes on organic coffee in the bulk bins when it's on sale. So those are two starting points. And then as far as household products, I would say at the very least, switch out your detergent. If you don't want to go for the totally all natural, because to be fair, it's not going to clean as well as some of the mainstream brands. And I've,
I actually found this product,
oh,
um,
which one?
and it's online, and I
Yep.
got it through Amazon. And
Okay.
this is just a sheet, and you
Oh,
can
was it
just put
Clean
it
People?
in. Yes, and it cleans so well and your clothes are so fluffier.
Oh,
And it's
cool.
so it, they have different, they have orange, lavender,
Oh,
but it's
nice.
all natural and all organic and made with vegetables.
Oh,
This
awesome.
is the good
Yeah,
part.
so I
Yeah.
know of the brand Clean People that has those sheets that, go in. They're like little rectangular sheets, and they also have pods. I've used that before. I thought those were pretty good. But if somebody isn't ready to take that step, at the very least, they can get the fragrance-free
Mhm.
products, which is different than unscented. Unscented means that they might actually have chemicals that are hiding some of the odors. So
Oh,
fragrance-free
that's
is
good to
better.
know. That's
Yeah.
good to
Or
know.
free and clear, I think is the way it's typically notated on the box
Perfect. Thank
or the
you very
bottle.
much, Amy.
Yeah,
It was wonderful to know. Thank you.
you're welcome. My
Appreciate that.
pleasure.
So, everybody, I am so glad all of you heard Amy and how you can save things in your life and turn around your life to start to live a better life and healthier life. Okay. So, I hope you learned a little bit from her, and we will continue doing and bringing wonderful people who are making a difference in your life and your personal life so you can start to make the shift to live better, to feel good, and then be happier. Namaste. Have a wonderful day.